Hey everyone, Sam here, the producer tutor, and I'm here to bring you a quick overview of some of my favourite features from my new template Purple Diver. Let's jump straight into it. So the first thing that I want to talk you through is some of the session organisation that I've got going on in here. Time and time again, I see sessions from people that are really poorly organised, and whilst it doesn't make too much of a difference when you're working on it and it's fresh in your memory and you can remember where everything is, when you go to come back to a session, maybe you've left it for a little while, you hadn't finished it, or maybe you thought it was done but then you want to go and make some tweaks a couple of months down the line. If you haven't got it organised nicely in the first place, it makes it really difficult to remember what was where and find out what you've got. So let me show you what I've got going on here. Now, as you'll have seen just there in that little clip, I've got everything here organised into summing stacks. So I've got my drums here, I've got an effects group, I've got a bass group, I've got a chord pluck group, and I've got a synth group. So everything is organised in a really logical way, and I've also colour-coded everything within those groups so that I can easily navigate with my eyes exactly what's going on there. So let's take you through these. If I open up my mixer view here, what you'll see here is that all of those groups are being routed to bus 32. Bus 32 is my mix bus. So I've created an extra level of control before everything goes to my stereo out, so I can do any mix bus processing there on my mix bus. Now you could assign those to whatever bus you like. I like to use bus 32 just because it's down at the bottom of the list, so it's out of the way, but you can use whatever bus number you like. But I think that's the first really important thing, to create an extra little level of control before your stereo out for any mix bus processing. Then let's take a look at what's going on in my drums, for example. Now you'll see my drums here is not actually a summing stack, it's in fact a folder stack. It's just got a VCA fader on it where I can't insert any effects, whereas all these other ones, my effects group, my bass group, they're all summing stacks rather than folder stacks, meaning that I can place inserts on those. Now why have I done that? Well, if I open that up, you'll actually see that within that folder stack, I've got a summing stack. So I've got a drums group within that drums VCA, and that's because inside it, I've got these 3 instances of Drum Machine Designer. Now, Drum Machine Designer works slightly differently to any other MIDI track in that Drum Machine Designer is effectively already a summing stack. It comes with whatever samples you've loaded into Drum Machine Designer on their own individual tracks, which it creates as a summing stack for you. So I could go in and place any insert onto any sample that I have loaded up within my Drum Machine Designer here. So you'll see on this Shaker Hat Drum Machine Designer channel here, I've got these 3 different shaker samples, and it automatically creates these 3 different channels for you and creates them within a summing stack. The great thing is that I can nest summing stacks within one folder stack in my project here. So I've got this drums group as well as these 3 Drum Machine Designer summing stacks all within this one folder stack here, which gives me real kind of minute detail of where everything is going. You'll see that I've got all of these different channels routed through this one summing stack here. So all of these individual drum components and also my 3 Drum Machine Designer tracks are all going out of this bus 1 here, which is going directly to my mix bus. So actually, this fader here isn't really doing anything at all. It's just containing everything so that I can file stuff away neatly. So that's a cool little hack. Next thing I want to draw your attention to is how I've processed my snares. Now you'll see that I've got 2 different snares set up. So let's just loop this main section here and let's hear these things in isolation and then together. So that's the snare 1, here's the snare 2. Okay, and together. So you should hear how that second snare is really thickening up that first snare and making it quite a bit wider as well. So what is it that I'm doing here? Now on the first snare, if we just hear it dry, pretty short, pretty punchy, and that's just coming from the original sample. Now I've high passed that very simply, just high passing it around 80 Hertz. And then I'm using some reverb. Now you'll see on the reverb that I'm then shaping the overall tone of it with some EQ within the reverb plugin. So I'm using this high shelf to cut some of that high-end energy from the reverb. And if we remove that high shelf, just making it much more controlled, much more manageable. So that's pretty simple. Then what about this second sound here? Let's just make it dry again. Check out the original sample. Okay, so a bit more clappy. And then I'm using this bit crusher. Now I love this plugin, it's really underrated. The key here is the downsampling. The downsampling is going to give it that kind of old school retro gaming kind of tone, and how much you downsample will affect how much of that flavour you get. So if I only downsample by 2 times, it's much more subtle, but as I increase this, it's going to get much more kind of crunchy and distorted and kind of get that vintage old school vibe. And I'm also adding some drive here as well. So that's doing a lot of the hard work for me in terms of the tone that I'm getting. Again, I've got some reverb, much drier and more subtle. Using this low pass here again to shape the tone of the reverb. So it's just giving it a little bit of bloom at the end. Then I've got this sample delay. Now this is key. Using the sample delay with just 1 millisecond on the left and 12 on the right is going to give it this thickening effect, this kind of stereo width that we haven't got on this sample initially. And this is what's going to make this sound much wider. And because the right delay is that little bit after the left, you have almost this really subtle flamming, but it's so fast that your ear doesn't perceive it as a flam, it still perceives it as one sound, which is great. Then channel EQ, just high passing and low passing to finalize how I want it to sound. So really tidying up the low end there to get rid of some of that kind of muddy gunkiness that we don't need. And in combination with our original snare, in the context of the mix, if I mute that second snare and then bring it in, you should just hear how it's just reinforcing that first snare and giving it that little bit more width. It's nothing drastic, it's nothing wild, but it's really useful. Love that. Now the next thing I want to draw your attention to is the movement that we've got on this shaker hat part here. Have a little listen to it in isolation. Now you hear that in isolation, you think, oh, that's nothing special. If I just remove this step effects plugin here, it becomes much less interesting. Okay, much less interesting. So let's have a look at what this step effects plugin is doing. Now I've turned everything off, so the mod is off, the filter is off, no distortion, reverb, delay, that's all off. All I'm using is this step modulator section here. Now, I've assigned the first modulator to the pan control, and the second is to the master output. So what this is going to do is adjust, first of all, the left and right position of that shaker hat sound, and secondly, it's going to adjust the overall level of the master output. So let's just hear the panning first of all. Now, the step modulator shape that I've selected is this random square shape. So it just randomizes how far left or right it's going to be panned. And you can choose any shape you like, but I want that slightly kind of, well, random feel. You then choose how far it's going to pan out with the depth control here, the rate at which it moves through this step sequence, and you can swing as well if you wish. So I'm going to really exaggerate it by bringing the depth right the way up and then back it back off to where I am now. So you can hear how it's just giving this really kind of interesting feel, giving me some movement within my mix, which is going to be really nice in context. Then I've got a second set of step sequencing going on my master output. Again, I'm on the random square feel. The depth is much higher, but my starting point is much less kind of significant. So let's hear what this sounds like as well. Let's have it out and then we'll bring it in. So just giving me a bit more dynamic interest there, which is exactly what I want to create some life within this shaker hat. So let's hear that in and out of the mix. We'll have it bypassed first of all, and then we'll bring it in and you'll hear what that's doing. Okay, the next thing that I want to point out to you is what's going on with this transition a little bit later in the track. So just have a little listen to it and then I'll tell you what's going on. Okay, so it's this really nice bass swell going on here that I want to draw your attention to. So here it is. It's just a Serum patch, and all the patches, by the way, come already contained within this template. So all of the patches for all of the Serum channels and everything else are all there, stored, ready for you to drag and drop straight into your project. Let's have a little look, most importantly, at the automation. Now, the automation here has got 3 different components to it. Let's just zoom in on those elements. So the first thing I'm doing very simply is automating the gain. So I've got this gain plugin on my channel here, which I'm automating from off effectively all the way up to where I want it at the end. That's the first thing. The second thing that I'm automating here is the filter cutoff within Serum. So here's my Serum patch and I'm automating this cutoff frequency here. And the third thing that I'm automating is on my channel EQ, and I'm automating the high cut frequency. So if I open that up and place that here, let's place those things all in view, 1, 2, 3. And as you see this transition here, you'll see firstly this gain automating, secondly this cutoff frequency, and thirdly this frequency, the high cut frequency here. It would help if I had the right EQ up though. It wasn't that one, it was this one. So let's just check that again. So very, very simple transition, only automating a few little things, but together they combine to create something really energetic and really moody. So don't forget that automating the gain is a really useful thing. Automating cutoff works great, and also automating EQ in combination together sound really nice. So let's just put that back in the context of the mix. On a similar vein, the last thing that I want to draw your attention to is a macro that I've got set up on my mix bus. Now you'll see if I open my mix bus here that I've got a mix bus macro that I'm automating. Now what is that? Now what I've done is, if I open up my smart controls here, you'll see that I've got this one mix bus macro that I set up here, and on it I've got a number of different parameters that are mapped to that one macro control. So let's open up all these things. Firstly, on my mix bus, I've got my stereo delay plugin. So let's open that up. And you'll see that I've got the mix left and mix right assigned to this one macro. So if I adjust this control, you'll see that those two parameters are moving with it. Now, they're not moving all the way. They're not going from 0 to 100%. What I've actually done is to specify the range of movement of those two parameters down here in this range control. So they're going from 0 to 26% as this macro goes from 0 to 100, which means that I can be really specific about how much of that effect I'm dialing in, which is great. I'm also automating the low cut frequency on my linear phase EQ. So here's my linear phase EQ, here's the low cut frequency. And again, I'm not going all the way, I'm going from 20 Hertz up to 284. So as I adjust that, you'll see that high pass, low cut tucking in there. You can see in the background there too, if I just rearrange these, that these output mixes on the delay are going at the same time. Finally, on my Space Designer, I'm adjusting the wet output. So here's my Space Designer. And let's just bring that down here so we can see all three things in context. Here's my wet amount. And again, that is dialing in at the same time. So what that means is once I've assigned all three of those things, or as many parameters as I want, to that one macro, I can then just automate this one thing, and it's going to adjust all those settings at the same time, which is a really cool function. So let's hear that in context. Let's come from this point here where I've got this automation going on. I'll pull those three things up for you so that you can see them all move, and I'll play the track so that you can see them all move together. So this whole project template is available now. It comes with every preset, every patch, every channel strip stored and ready for you to drag and drop straight into your projects. There's loads more that you can learn from this. So you can grab the template from the link in the description down below. You can also hear this track in full on the separate YouTube video, which I'll also link down in the description below if you want to hear the whole thing in full. I'll be back very soon with another template for you, but in the meantime, keep making your music and we'll speak soon.